I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Hi there.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good.
Some more conversation about going down south. So about that. I'm excited about it. Again, I know I've said it multiple times, but I've done southern tours before in my life, and there is this wonderful cultural difference. Now, I live in Florida, so if you're actually looking at a map of the United States, you'll see that Florida is the south, it is the southeast, and that it dips all the way down into the Caribbean waters, or well, the Atlantic, but like it's pointing towards the Caribbean waters. But when I'm on U.S. territory, I'm in Miami. And so in Miami, we call it also kind of North Cuba. It's a little bit different than what we kind of would typically attribute to what Southern culture is. The other day, you said that you lived, where did you live in Florida?
St. Augustine. So upper East Coast. Yeah, which is very, very close to Georgia, right? Because Jacksonville's just above St. Aug, and then you got so yeah, it's more Georgia than it is Florida.
And that's what I was trying to explain when we're looking at the map of the United States and we're looking at what the southern states are inclusive of. So Florida is the southernmost state on the map. And then you have the ones that are right above it. You have the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. You have Georgia. You have Tennessee. You have Louisiana.
Alabama, Mississippi.
Thank you for me. So those are, when we're talking about the South, we're talking about United States and a particular culture. I'm going to say that because I was born in the Northeast and then raised in the Northeast and raised in the Northeast with Caribbean culture. So my understanding of the South didn't really, like, I would hear about the South and hear about Southern ideology and Southern differences. And then I was raised in the West Coast in California, which is a completely progressive,
totally different world. Yeah.
So then coming and moving down into Miami and having this kind of like Caribbean U.S. culture situation happening in Miami in particular, but then going up even to Fort Lauderdale, going up to Orlando, which is kind of central of Florida, being up in Tallahassee and Gainesville, which is north of Florida, you progressively get more Southern cultures, Southern United States culture in that movement. And there was a time in like 2015, 16, where somebody who is from the Tallahassee area was like, let me just take you through the South and let you experience some more of the South. And it was a really impactful experience. One of the places that I went was South Carolina and went to a plantation there. And so going back there with you in this moment, I wanted to talk about some of the Southern cultural differences that we'll be experiencing. We'll be talking with the Gullah Geechee people, as we talked about in an episode. But like, what are some of the Southern cultural context to be aware of a white identified person?
Well,
and the throat gets cleared.
Yeah, I know. Got to clear my throat chakra.
Southern respectability.
Just thinking about the South, I get clogged up, right? So
a little
here comes the phlegm. It's interesting. I'm actually excited about this trip, which is the first time I've been excited to go back to Charleston since I moved away from there. And I was thinking about it the other day. I was trying to identify, like, why am I excited? You know, what's different about this time than other? And I think it's having you there with me, being able to, you know, I'm in my type A, you know, gotta get everything all set up and ducks in a row. And, you know, the event planner in me is reaching out to you like every other day going, hey, do you want to do this tour? And what do you think about that? And how do you do it? Oh, yeah. God love you. You just keep responding to me going, I'll do whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want. And so, So yes, I think it's a different experience for me because I know that you've been there before, but you haven't been there in a while, and you had an experience that was maybe not the didn't leave you with the best taste in your mouth, and I feel like I feel very invested in wanting to show you Charleston, the real Charleston, not whitewashed. I want it to be authentic. But I'm looking forward to it in a weird, I guess maybe I haven't totally identified why I'm so excited, to show you this, because I also don't want, I'm also imagining that your impact will be different than mine. And I don't want you to feel harmed, just by being in that space. So I haven't gotten caught up in that. That'll probably happen on the drive down. I'll start thinking about, how do I protect you from this harm? How do I,
So here's the thing: you cannot protect me from the harm.
Right, I know, it's
like
not my job.
That's not even it. And my previous experience going into South Carolina, I was like, I don't need to return here. So I'm glad that I am returning here, being able to have this experience. And when you say the authentic, non-whitewashed South Carolina, I don't know what you mean by that, because for me, South Carolina, being the South, being culturally the South, and it being the U.S., it's all whitewashed. So what would authentic South Carolina non-whitewashed be?
Great question. The first responsiveness that I have to that would be just approaching. So we've talked about this before, there's very strong storytelling narrative in Charleston. We've talked about the antebellum, which is the time of this country's existence before the Civil War, with, white women in big hoop skirts and drinking mint juleps and the parasols and the Southern way of doing things, completely oblivious to the fact that they were owning humans and enslaving humans, and all of the splendor that whiteness created on the backs of those that they kidnapped and enslaved. That's the whitewash version, and in 2026, 250 years later from the inception of our Constitution in this country that we're about to celebrate, I'm using air quotes for those that are not watching, doesn't take into account anything but the whitewashed version. To me, flag waving, patriotic, land of the free, home of the brave mindset is whitewashed, because that doesn't take into consideration the harm that was caused and continues to be caused by the systems and the narratives and the racism that is built into every thread of the fabric of this country. So I always, when I tell people that I moved up north from Charleston, they always have the same response. Oh, I love Charleston. It's so beautiful. And it's so this and it's so that. And I respond to them and say, yes, they've got a very good publicist. It's a wonderful place to visit if you look like me. It is not a good place to live, no matter what you look like. But it's better for people that look like me than it is for people that look like you. But anybody that lives there, it's all touristy. Everything is geared towards tourism. So living there is not that great for anybody, really. But so I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of how I perceive the difference between the whitewashed version and the real Charleston, which is 40%, of enslaved, of kidnapped humans came through that port, and the plantations that are still there, where they herald the stories, but they don't even identify the fact that, there's one plantation that I know of in Charleston called McLeod Plantation, and they talk about the big house it is open, but they don't do any tours in it. They say, if you want to go in it, have at it, but that's not what we're going to talk about. They talk about the enslaved. They call it a forced labor camp. They don't call it a plantation. It's still It still says plantation on the sign, but the interpreters, the tour guides, call it a forced labor camp because that's what it is, And so to me, that's a difference between the whitewashed and the real
I see. Okay.
is the
So
story.
not glorifying the story,
Right.
and talking about like all of the kind of wonderful, quaint, demure things that we think about in the
Right.
nostalgia of, the antebellum South, and
Right.
more like the truth of what people were experiencing during that period in time. And
Yes.
this brings up a wonderful curiosity for me, because I'm thinking about a time when there was a rapid response that we were having in Florida. Some young people had some issues with school resource officers. A Black young lady was accosted by a school resource officer in a really violent and harmful way. And so people coming from more of the city area came into this more rural town, Polk County in particular, in Florida, which is it's a place where a majority of the people who support MAGA and all of that reside, lots of law enforcement. So that is like kind of the identity of the community of Polk County. And so going into that space and kind of trying to have a community conversation with people, predominantly from the Black identified community. Mm-hmm. And folks was like, don't come over here with none of them big city politics. Don't bring that to this community. We don't want none of that. We have a way that we exist here today. And we have a relationship with people who are white identified here. And we don't want none of that to be messed up. We tell our kids when they go to school to listen so that we don't have to worry about anything happening to them. And so if they don't, so that it was a really different cultural ideology and understanding of like not interfering with the way that the community exists. And I'm curious about that in South Carolina, because when I was there, I was asking to hear more authentic Black stories. And other than the Gullah Geechee, that wasn't offered to me. Like I didn't, I mean, at the time, the African American History Museum
wasn't open yet. Yeah.
At all. But like just trying to find and identify libraries or storytellers or anyone who would give me a accounting of a non-white antebellum South wonderfully demure a story, that did not happen from white identified people or Black identified people. So it's a very interesting, and to your point, it's a very touristy thing, and the narrative is always going to be one of attracting people, like one of the tours being available that you offered to me as we're going on this trip, and you were offering me the choice of like, what would I be interested in seeing? And there was one that was like an auction block tour, and that was the one that I was like, there's no way in hell I would not even be able to sit in a space of recounting or even talking about the selling of humans. But that is one of the things that is offered as an opportunity for you to be able to experience if you're going into the Southern culture. And some people might see the benefit of having that experience. That would be just a little too difficult for me to hold on to. But right. So it's like some of those little idiosyncrasies about Southern culture that I'm curious about, and that we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, and to give people context, I certainly, there's the Gullah Geechee tour that we're going on. They offer 4 different tours. One of them's at night, and one of them is the daytime that we're taking. And there was an old slave market, because there is an old slave museum that you can go to that is in the old slave auction house. And they do, they talk about, I mean, it is a museum about the enslaved, what the experience of the enslaved folks were in Charleston. So to that end, they do a beautiful job of telling the story. It's like, and some folks would say, why do you even want to tell that story? And why would you even call that beautiful? But in Charleston, they have to be intentional about telling that story. Otherwise, it will not exist, to your point. And so there are storytellers. That's why this Gullah Geechee tour company exists, because if you take one, like, for example, Charleston is known for its horse-drawn carriage tours. You can get on the carriage and they draw a lottery. So it depends on what part of the city you go through, and and the tour guides are not required to have any kind of training. Half the time they make all the shit up that they talk about. And but I remember one time I was I would think it was before I moved from Charleston, and I remember being, you never see anybody that's non-white on these tours. Every time I saw a carriage full of people, it probably held like 20 to 25 people. They were always white people. And, if you rolled your window down and listened to what the guide was saying, it's like, he's talking bullshit. You just want to scream at him, don't listen to him. You gave him all this money and he's telling you just whatever the hell he wants to tell you. But I remember one time before I left, I was downtown, and I was at one of the side streets. I was stopped at a light, and there was a carriage going in through the intersection in front of me. And I think I had my windows down so I could hear him talking, because they always talk and kind of elevated because they're trying to get the folks that are behind them to hear them. And he said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of that Charleston was the cradle of slavery. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to like lean out the window and go, thank you for telling the truth. Because I'd never heard a horse-drawn tour guide say anything to that effect, that this was the cradle of slavery. This is where it started. They'll talk about the Civil War starting there, and they'll talk about, different other things that are attached to the Civil War, but they won't. That was one of the most authentic sentences I'd ever heard come out of a horse-drawn carriage tour guide's mouth. And I appreciated it because it's, and I had conversations with the mayor before I left. At the time, it was Mayor Tecklenburg, and I had conversations with him. He would have lunch with the mayor, and you could go on at like noon. You could get on a Zoom and have a conversation with him. And I told him, I said, you have a unique opportunity. Charleston presents itself with this opportunity to show the rest of the country how you can claim the reality of what your city contributed to the harms of this country. And people will still come, tourists. There might be some people that don't want to hear that and they won't come, but the majority of people, and you could show the rest of the country how this country could begin to start to tell the real story about what happened. And it's, but he was not open to it at all. And I'm sure he wouldn't have gotten the city council or anybody to back that up. I was actually in Charleston, I was part of an organization or a group that spearheaded an official apology that the Charleston City Council voted on and read out loud. And it was, months and months and months of negotiating language and what are you going to apologize for and all of this stuff. And I remember being at the city council meeting the night that it got voted on, and they had done everything they could to block the vote, bitching about this, fussing about that. No, the language has to be changed here. And usually these city council meetings, they start at like 6 p.m., 5 p.m., and they usually go a couple of hours and then they're done. It did not get voted on. They fussed and talked and filibustered and did everything they could. They didn't vote on that apology until 10:30 at night. We had all been sitting there for 5 hours waiting for them to vote on this friggin' apology that they had spent well over a year
developing
about the languaging. And they still wanted to fuss about the language because the idea of them apologizing for something was beyond, any white person's imagination in that space. Mm-hmm. And so that's the struggle. And I don't know that Charleston is unique. It's particularly spicy in that town, but it's not unique to that at all in terms of that struggle of trying to tell the real story.
West is unique to it, and we have a perfect example in what just happened with that UN resolution, and
right.
There is still this denial of the truth. And as we're talking about the 250th anniversary of the inception of the United States, like the denial of the truth of how we get to this place that we're at today. And this place that we're at today is not a place where we're speaking in harmony about the way that we were initially. Well, initially we weren't that we're not the white supremacist society that was initially envisioned in the Constitution of the United States. And I say that because we know that nobody else, as the U.S. Constitution was being erected, was in consideration other than white males at that time. So,
Right.
So it's an interesting thing that we are at this place 250 years later where white males are saying, please also make sure that you are having us in consideration. In the way that
because we're so
because because
nobody's listening to us anymore. Yeah,
well,
we're so marginalized. That's the word
yes,
they're adopting, that they're marginalized. Yeah.
and they are. I hear that argument of the targeting. I don't know about marginalization, but I do hear the argument of the targeting. If you're thinking about the context with which they are understanding that they come into position in the United States, right? So they're not having that positioning. And so it's like, okay, we want to return to 250 years later, what was envisioned for us in our positioning. And we want to maintain that positioning because we're not living and existing in that way, because other people also there's a migration of a lot of other people, but then other people are also saying that we should be afforded the same human dignity and position, and people trying to figure out how to share power. And that's a very, very hard thing to do. But one of the reasons why it's important to be going into the South when we talk about sharing power, because the economics that creates the power structures comes out of the South of the United States. And people really, really don't understand that. Like when we talk about making America great again, we are talking about this antebellum ideology. We're talking about, pre-civil rights. We're talking about Jim Crow. This is the thing that creates the power and position that allows and affords white males to be in leadership in the way that we're seeing them exist in leadership today.
Going to Charleston with you, I am excited to do so. I'm excited to show you around and introduce you to people that I know and that I love, and break bread together and be in community with folks that I think, it will be a really, I'll be curious to hear your take on your, not necessarily comparison, but just your experience of your time there this time versus, and maybe it'll be the same, maybe it'll be just as difficult. I don't know, but yes, I'm all of my type A personality traits are coming out and planning this trip for the tour.
Well, I don't remember where we ate. Like I have some hits, but I know that the food is good there. And I'm excited about eating good food.
The food is good. Yeah.
Because Southern cuisine is a particular type of cuisine in the United States that really feeds into your soul. And that is the thing about the South, even the discomfort about the South. I'm excited about the different ways that it feeds into your soul, even the discomfort that feeds into your soul. Like all of the ways that I was jarred at my experience, all of the ways that I was jarred by the reality of the history that is clearly illustrated when you go to the plantations. Like you can feel it in your body, but then you're seeing what it must have, for me, what it must have been for some people to be in what I considered a very beautiful environment and not be able to not be able to enjoy that beauty because that beauty came with your blood.
Right.
And so that kind of internal struggle about being in the South, but then just the cultural ways of being, the demureness, the clutching your pearls, the I'm going to be sweet to you at the same time I really have no care or consideration for you, but my Southern,
stab you in the back as soon as you turn around. Bless your heart. Yes.
Bless your heart and all of that kind of stuff.
It is the key. It is the originator of bless your heart.
And it's a particular type of fuckery that's that is the United States.
It is a microcosm. That's why I told the mayor, I was like, you have a unique opportunity. I mean, this town, that town could be the beginning of the greater unpacking of this country. And I realize, I mean, please, I know you know this, but just to the listeners out there, I get why it's not doing that. I'm not foolish enough to think that, that we're at a place yet where people feel brave enough to say, yeah, we're going to own our shit and we're going to do what we can to. I mean, I was there when they took the Calhoun statue down from Marion Square, which is the main park in the middle of Charleston that you often see when you see pictures of Charleston. Marion Square is often the place. But if you look at an aerial view of Marion Square, it has a path that has been walked from corner to corner, which creates a Confederate flag. When you look at the Marion Square from an aerial view, it looks like a Confederate flag. So that's where the Calhoun statue was, and I was there when they took it down. And now I just saw, because I still follow quite a few of my friends from there, and Calhoun statue has been returned to South Carolina. And I don't know exactly where it is. They're not going to put it back up in Marion Square, but it's back in South Carolina, and because they just can't say goodbye to their slavers.
Calhoun is? I don't know.
Say it again?
I don't think I know the story of Calhoun.
Oh, John C. Calhoun was the vice president of the U.S. I don't remember exactly what years he was, but in the 50s, and this is the story for those that are not on U.S. soil. This is an interesting story about that whitewashing that we were talking about originally. There are quite a few Civil War statues erected around the country, specifically in the South, very intentionally in southern cities, heralding Confederate soldiers, General Lee, who was the head of the Confederate Army, that kind of thing. But they were not erected. People tend to think that they were put up after the Civil War was over to remember the brave soldiers that died, which is the story. But they were actually put up in the 50s to intimidate people. That's the only reason they were put up. And so
this is history.
Yeah. So leading up to the Civil Rights era, they were erecting these Civil War statues, specifically in southern states, in cities, to intimidate. So John C. Calhoun was a proponent of slavery. There are many writings and speeches, transcripts of speeches that you can see. He was an unabashed supporter of chattel slavery. And he was the vice president of the country at one time. And one of the main streets in Charleston is Calhoun Street. There are many streets in Charleston that are named after Confederate folks. But so this statue was put up in Marion Square, which is the main park in the middle of Charleston, which is right next to the original Citadel we talked about in the last episode. That was the place where they took slave catchers once emancipation happened and created a police force. And so that was the original Citadel, which is right next to Marion Square. So they put his statue up in this park, but they put it up low and it kept getting vandalized. And so eventually they raised it. He was 35 feet in the air or something like that. I mean, you really could barely even see like his face. If you didn't know who it was, you'd be like, who the fuck is that? He's all the way up there. You can't even see him. But they had to put him up that high to stop people from vandalizing him. And he was there for 150 some years. They've been trying to get him down. And the city of Charleston kept saying, we don't own the park, so we can't take him down. Because Marion Square is not owned by the city. It's owned by a private family, and they lease it to the city to use it. And so that was their excuse for not taking him down. And he was put up there to intimidate the newly emancipated Black people that were living in Charleston. They had to walk by his statue when they were allowed to walk in that part of town. And so he was just a symbol to intimidate. And so, but when I was living there, they did finally get him down. Miraculously, they found some clause in some paper written somewhere that gave them permission to take him down. And it was a whole thing. And I stayed up all night in the square, and we pulled an all night vigil waiting for that statue to get taken down. And funny enough, wasn't funny, but it wasn't ha funny, but it was ironic funny. They couldn't figure out how to get him down. They were up there with welders and saws and the things to try to get him down. He was the way they had mounted him up there, he was so ensconced in the pillar structure that it took them over 24 hours to cut him down, because he was up there. And I remember all night thinking that they were going to figure out a reason not to take him down, that they were going to say that it was just too difficult and we can't figure out how to get him down, so he's going to have to stay up there. But they did finally get him down the next day. So
as you're saying this, I'm like kind of extrapolating to like the larger context of like, having this symbol of this message that repeats that a certain demographic of the population, Black people in particular, that you will always be considered slave, right? And I didn't know Calhoun until you just, let me know what the story was behind him writing and being in so support of chattel slavery. But like every time you look at me, it is a reminder that we consider you as slave and as property, and as and that is what your value system is. The fact that that it was getting vandalized means like the cultural context of the people don't really agree with that ideology. But then those who are in power and position decide that they're going to even elevate this thought process of this is what we're supporting and elevating. And then it's so deeply ingrained in the space that it takes all kinds of tools and time to try to remove it out of. And this is literally what this administration... Metaphors
abound. They're all over the place.
All over the place. So like us going into the South, there's so much significance to what we are experiencing at the time, to kind of go and do this honest analysis about what it is that people are celebrating at 250 years in the inception of the United States, because it has direct impact today on the different metaphors that are all over the place that are telling about our history and what we need to be thinking about so that our future can look different.
Yes. Well, we can't, I know Dr. Phil is a horribly problematic person, but he did say one thing that I will never forget.
Oprah, Dr. Phil?
Yeah,
Oprah,
yeah.
Dr.
And I know he's horribly problematic. He's a super Zio, and there's just all kinds of things that I don't like about him. But he did say something that has always rung true with me, which is that you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And to me, that is the key issue with why this country, why the U.S. is still so deeply imploding on itself, because we will not acknowledge the original sins of how this country was bred. We want to stand on that antebellum mint julep hoop skirt parasol holding wonderful people that owned other humans. That's the narrative. It's all connected. So that's why Charleston, to me, could be so pivotal in shifting that narrative if they just had the frigging courage to stand in the truth of that city and say, you know what, you're right. And they do little things like the International African American Museum, which you and I are going to go visit, is on Gadsden's Wharf, which is where the ships came into port. That's where all of those enslaved humans were brought off. And that's where they were housed. There were warehouses down there that they were kept in until it was decided, how they were going to go. So that museum is built on that land, and they reclaimed that space to tell, the true story. And I can't wait to go through it because I haven't been in it yet. It opened after I left. And so they do these little whispers. They do these little things like taking the Calhoun statue down. It's like, oh, okay, we've solved something. No, you haven't solved a damn thing. You just took a statue down that should have been never put up, right? So no, you didn't fix it.
You want that type of messaging to be going across. It served its purpose.
Say it one more time, because you got pixelated there for a second.
Oh, I was saying, put up if you want that type of messaging to come across. It served its purpose.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It puts people back to sleep. It puts, okay, now we have the International African American Museum. So, we're not racist anymore. I mean, that's what whiteness wants. We want this magical thing to happen that we're not racist anymore. And we are always going to be racist because we were raised in the soup, and the soup has never gotten cleansed. And so it's like, until the soup gets cleansed, we're just going to keep raising more racist children that look like me, because that's the indoctrination and the programming that we were born into. And Charleston just plays a very specific role in that, at least for me. So, yeah.
Well, I'm curious to have the experience, and I'm excited about the choices that you've made to show me. I'm curious as to what those choices are, and then what my reflection in those spaces are going to be like. I always really lots of fun, and
I think we're going to have some interesting conversations after it.
We always have interesting conversations.
Oh, that's true, but we'll have a particular extra set of topics to unpack,
because I know things are going to be brought up. They're going to be brought up. So.
Oh yeah, and and I mean, and I'm saying out loud to hold myself accountable that I will spend all the 14 hours driving down, probably tracking my brain and letting go of this compulsion to protect you from any harm that I might do, and any harm that might be done by, I mean, it's scary for me to walk those streets with you and to run the risk of having some stupid shit come out of my mouth. I'm really nervous about that. So.
I could walk around with like a little church fan that's like that says harm on it, and just be like, harm.
I mean, if you feel like you need to do that, especially for me, I'm down with it, because I'm terrified of that.
I find it fascinating, and I'm curious. This is a conversation for white people. We're all going out there. Is this that like do you walk into spaces? I'm curious if people walk into spaces thinking about I'm creating harm. I don't feel like you, Diane, my friend and colleague, are intentional about creating harm. And I, as a Black identified woman out here, y'all hear that out there listening? As a Black identified woman, the history is hurtful and painful, but I also recognize that in my presence, I am existing in going to Charleston at a much better time than the pain of the history, right? And so I get to be in the celebration and the joy of the evolution from there, and the misfortune that we are under an administration that would want to roll all of that progress back.
Right.
So we really can just go there with like a curiosity of like, I want to hear how you feel about this and how you feel about this, and not so much about harm and pain. Honestly, I was joking about the little flag situation, and I'm good about saying ouch, or I'm good about saying this is how I experience this.
Well, it occurred to me yesterday, I was thinking about it, and I thought, you and I have only been in person with each other twice now. Mm-hmm. We met for the first time after knowing each other for 3 years virtually in DC, when we were both there for separate things, and we were able to come together and break bread together. And then you came up here for my wedding, which was, had its own swirl of things. Yes. And, so we spoke to each other, and we said hi, and we hugged and all those things, but we didn't really this is going to be an opportunity. This is going to be 7 days of us sharing space together, at the end of every day, whatever we ended up doing that day, unpacking if we feel like we want to, talking about what our impressions were and our experiences. And I'm super excited about that, because I feel like we haven't had that experience before, to just be the two of us in space together and having experiences and then relating to each other how that landed on us. If we feel like we want to do that, we haven't been able to do that yet. So the processing that we do is on here, And so, I mean, you and I, we'll like come up with something we want to talk about, but they were like, no, don't start. We have to record first. Don't talk about it yet. We have to wait. And so it'll be like a 7-day podcast recording.
It will. And it
yeah.
will be different because we also get to get off this podcast and be away from each other, right? Like,
right.
I don't know the practice of what it is that you do after you get off, what's your decompression, or if that's even necessary, what you do after, you know what I mean? Like a conversation, or this is also just going to be different because we'll be walking into the experience and reflecting on their experience at the time.
In real time. Yeah. We're together in person with each other, which I'm do I worry about harm all the time? Yeah, I do. And but I want to get better about that because I feel like I'm trying to find that middle ground. I feel like the pendulum swings and I get hypervigilant about it. And I want to find that middle ground where I can just be in space with someone and not be worried that if harm happens, it's not going to be the end of the world. And I know that you will say, ouch, and we will talk about it because I trust that you know how to do that. I haven't always spent a lot of time with people that know how to do that. Either they don't know, and I don't mean to say don't know how, but don't feel like that's not a practice that we've gotten accustomed to or whatever. So it doesn't occur to them. Maybe the ouch happens and they might feel it in the moment, or they don't think about it until later on and they go, oh, that happened. And then we don't have that relationship to talk about it later on. So this is going to be a very different experience for me as it is going to be for you. And I'm really looking forward to that. So.
Yes, I'm going to challenge you to be in space with me without thinking about all of the ways that you could possibly harm. And I will do the same. I didn't have that thought process at all, but I'm just offering to you that kind of like balance.
Yeah.
And also I appreciate you being concerned about my harm, but I'm also recognizing in this moment, there's a safety thing that you're sitting in. And so I'm going to offer to you to trust that if there is harm, you and I have enough relationship to be able to get through talking through it, that it won't be the end of the world. That's the thing. Like there's not going to be a moment unless, some guns get pulled out and, N-words start flying, that I would be like, and even in that, I'd be like, what's really going on?
What's going on with you?
What is this? Because and I realized this about myself. I had this like just a social interaction with this woman who does not know me, but every single time I am in the same presence as her, she calls me a different name. And the next time that she does it, because 3 will be a charm for me. The next time I'm gonna sit down with her and just be like, I don't even know your name, lady. I really honestly don't even remember your name. But I'm curious as to why this is happening. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I don't know what her responsiveness is going to be to it, but like, I am okay with having an understanding. That's what I want more than anything from people. Like, how are you processing your brain? The curiosity of that is what matters to me.
Yeah. I'm gonna be practicing very much. I used to say to my daughter when she was young and coming into high school and had to do presentations and stuff, she would get very anxious. And my saying to her was always, wiggle your toes inside your shoes and be where your feet are. And, to remind her where the ground is under her feet and to stay present, and that's going to be, if I set an intention for the trip, that's going to be my intention, to stay present and to not float off into all of these, because I do that. I will predict. I'll try to predict where harm could happen so that I could try to avoid it. And that it's going to be exhausting for me. It'd probably be way exhausting for you. And so I yeah, I think that's the counterbalance for me on that, is to stay present. Where are my toes? And if you have to look at me and go, are you wiggling your toes? That'll be
Everything out. We don't have to fix and figure everything out. You're doing
I don't have to apologize for the ills of the city. I don't have to prove to you that I know that slavery was wrong. I don't have to do any of that. And yeah, so
Look at that exhale. That's a wonderful exhale.
that was a big exhale. Oh my goodness.
It's good we're doing this. This is what we needed to do when this country was being developed.
Yeah. And what we still need to do to try to redirect the energy,
We're doing it. We're a catalyst for it. So
we are. So I love you.
Love you too.
And I am excited to dive into these adventures. So more will be revealed. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. All right. Bless.
All right. Take care.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.